Welcome to another edition of Ask the First Selectman. I'm Jim Cameron, your host and program director of TV 79. And you, as a faithful viewer, know this is a show where we get to ask specific questions of our first selectman, who is joined today by a special guest. Would you like to introduce your guest, John?
Happy to, Jim. Today we are joined by our state representative, Tracy Marra, who has been at the coalface in terms of dealing with this legislation and is really well informed both about the outcome that we got with the governor's veto and kind of what happens next. So happy that she's here today to help us with this question.
Thank you. Happy
Excellent.
to be here.
So, our first question is there was a bill that had been approved by the legislature, HB 5002, that the governor said he would veto. What would have happened if that bill had gone through in terms of housing in Darien?
I'll let you start, Tracy.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I would like to remind everybody that this wasn't a simple bill. This kind of took so many aspects of what they saw in both housing and planning development, which are two separate committees, and then piled them all in on one bill. The most egregious part that we in our neck of the woods see when we already have so much density is the amount of affordable housing that an outside firm had recommended that we build here in Darien. And it was allocated to each of the separate towns how much their share was with this. And the numbers were not supportable. So that was one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest pushes for reasons why we did not think that that was going to be supportable. The number was, and again, how they even came up with this number was a little asinine, but 491 affordable. But we know when building houses, you don't just build in order to do it and have a developer come in and do it. They do 14% here in Darien because we have inclusionary zoning, which is amazing. Other towns don't have it, or maybe they have 10%. So 14% would be the quote unquote affordable, and the other 86% would be at market rate. So if you add that up, you're looking at 4,000 to 5,000 new housing units here in Darien, which just is it just really can't be done.
Yeah,
And
just
John,
quickly.
what do we mean by affordable, and
Sure.
how does that differ from town to town?
Sure. So before I answer that question, just to add on to what Tracy said, just to give you some context, we have built about 760 multifamily units in Darien in the last 20 years, of which about 260 of those units have been either renovated or created that are affordable units. And so when the state comes in and says, all right, you built 260 of these units in the last 20 years, now we're going to require you to build nearly 500 additional units. And as Tracy said, the reason that we have that 14% requirement is that we have private developers develop our affordable housing. And by requiring 14%, they're going to make just enough money from their market rate units to subsidize the affordable units. So that allows private developers to maintain their project economics. But as Tracy said, if we're going to do that, it's going to require them to build, 4,000 or 5,000 units of multifamily housing in Darien to achieve those affordable housing goals. Keep in mind, Darien is a town of 22,000 people. We have about 7,000 residences. And so they're talking about increasing the number of residences in this town by thousands. And it completely changes the character of Darien, which is why we were so concerned. So to answer your question in terms of what we mean by affordable housing, the way they think about it is trying to cater to people who have lower income levels at different levels. So the metric that we use is what's called SMI, state median income. And for the town of Darien, that's the relevant number. And what you look at is affordable housing at different percentages of that. So obviously, affordable housing at 80% of state median income is going to have a higher affordable rent than say housing at 60% or 40% of state median income. So it's not just a question of affordable housing, but what level of affordability that we're talking about. And so if you force these developers to say, no, you've got to build at say 40% of SMI, that's a much lower rent for those affordable units and makes their project economics a lot more difficult.
But again, that bill has now been vetoed, and the governor has called for a special session in the fall to re-examine all these issues. And we're going to talk about that in part two of our discussion in the next edition of Ask the First Selectman.